Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is your guide to HMRC submissions, where we'll be talking about each of the submissions that you can do in payroll, what they are, and when to send them as well. My name's Alice, and I'm going to be hosting and presenting the session today. I'm also joined by my colleague Duncan, who'll be helping on the Q&A panel throughout the session. And a little look at what we've got in store for today. So an introduction to real-time information first of all. So what is RTI? Followed by the main section of the webinar. So this is going to be all about those HMRC submissions, a little bit of a walkthrough of what they are, what they include, and deadlines as well, if there are any deadlines for them, when you would need to send them. We do then have a section on the e-submissions log and FPS viewer. So they're both different ways that you can check the submissions that you've sent to HMRC. And then last but not least, we do have a section on the personal tax account as well. So what this is, just in case you're not aware of that, and some of the key features and benefits too. But let's begin with that introduction of RTI then. So RTI does stand for real-time information, and this is a system where employers report payroll data to HMRC and just ensures up-to-date and accurate tax records. Now, it's not been around forever, but it was introduced to employers operating a PAYE scheme in April 2013. So previously, employers would have submitted certain forms to HMRC at the end of the tax year which had these details on instead, and then forms when they had starters or leavers. But RTI did change all of that. So the RTI submissions include all of that information that HMRC need. So no more paper forms, and instead it is, of course, reported more regularly too. Now, employers must report PAYE to HMRC every time they pay their employees, and that's on or before the pay date. And this is called the FPS, or the full payment submission. So if you did a weekly payroll, and let's say your next pay date was the 31st of July, you would have to report the payroll data for that week on or before the 31st of July. And then same principle applies to all of the different pay frequencies too. Now, if you've not paid any employees in tax month, you still need to inform HMRC that no payment is due, so you must report that to them. But this is a different submission, and that's instead called the EPS, or Employer Payment Summary. There are some other scenarios where you would send an EPS to, which I will get into a little bit later in the webinar. Now, RTI is a mandatory system, so it's introduced by HMRC, and it is really, really important that you remain compliant and meet these deadlines. If employers don't comply with the RTI requirements, not only could this lead to incorrect tax and national insurance records for your employees, but as an employer, it would lead to consequences too, which could include penalties or specific charges as well. So with this, if you do have any queries or need support with these requirements, we would advise that you contact HMRC themselves, just in case you do have any questions there. Of course, as always, we do have helpful links to further support throughout the slides. So yeah, be sure to download the handout to get those, and loads of different articles included here with all of the information on that you'll need. But in order to submit the payroll data and meet those RTI requirements that I've mentioned there, employers need to set up something called a government gateway account, and that's going to allow you to access HMRC's online services. And it's your login for this account which you'll enter into the e-submission settings in Payroll, which connects Payroll to your government gateway account to then be able to submit that data across to HMRC. Now, this government gateway account, it also gives employers access to the HMRC PAYE online services. So this gives you access to loads and loads of handy resources online, such as checking what you owe HMRC, paying your bills, seeing payment information and history, accessing tax codes and notices about your employees as well, and then loads more too. So a lot of you probably will already have this set up and linked, but for any of you who are new to payroll, definitely worth looking into, just making sure that you've got that side of things all set up, including, linking the payroll there in your e-submission settings. But on a lighter note, before we do dive into those different submissions, I do want to just talk you through a little bit of a timeline of RTI that I've put together. Just interesting to kind of know when things kind of started really. So we do begin in 1944. And this was the introduction of the pay-as-you-earn system. So this was introduced to streamline the correction of income tax directly from employees' wages, more regularly as well, whereas previously people would have completed an annual assessment, and they would have actually only paid the tax due a couple of times during the year. We then jump forward to 2004 to 2005 with online reporting, and this is where employers began submitting PAYE information online. So this does mark the first major shift towards a digital reporting. Another little jump now, but this time to April 2012, and this is where the phased introduction of RTI began, so real-time information. So the RTI pilot, this started in April 2012 with a small group of volunteer employers, and this did increase in 3 stages up to March 2013, by the time over 6 million individual records were being reported in real time. And then a month later, April 2013, RTI did become mandatory for all employers, and it required them to submit payroll data to HMRC on or before each payday, as I previously mentioned there with the FPS. And then fast forward to today, 2025, RTI is fully integrated in the payroll process and of course ensures accurate and timely reporting to HMRC. Just found that interesting, did just want to include a little bit on that before we move on to the actual submissions themselves. So speaking of those submissions, in this section I am going to be breaking down each of them, what they are and how to send them. And we're going to start with one that you'll probably come across most often, which is the full payment submission. So as we now know, you do need to send an FPS each time you pay your employees to notify HMRC of the liabilities in the pay period and your payroll data, and all employees who are paid need to be included. Now the liability, this is made up of loads of different things. So you've got your PAYE, your employer's national insurance, employees' national insurance, student loan and postgraduate loan. And when I say liabilities in the payment period, that refers to the amount of money that a business or individual owes to HMRC. So essentially the money that you owe them. Now, the liability isn't the only thing that makes up the FPS though. It does include a lot more information. So you've also got things on payment and deduction details, any new starters or leavers that you might have had, employee pension contributions, student loan indicators, payment dates and things like that. So although you can't necessarily see all of this information going across in the FPS, it is still there, but instead it's just been sent across in the background. But that is essentially what the FPS is and what's included. Just a little reminder of when it's needed as well. So it must be submitted after processing each pay run on or before the pay date. So I run a monthly payroll, for example. My next pay date is going to be 31st of July. I'll need to make sure that my FPS is submitted on or before this date. Also important to mention as well, you only need to send one FPS per payment frequency and per payment period. So once per month, once per week, fortnight, 4 weeks, etc., whatever your payment frequency is. Payroll actually won't let you send more than one per period for an employee. Now, if you run a payroll the way you've got a mixture of different payment frequencies, so let's say you've got some monthly and some weekly employees, you would send one FPS, including all of your monthly employees once you've processed them. And then each week, when you process your weekly staff, you would send an FPS including all of your weekly employees. So each week you'd send that for them. And what is it used for? Well, HMRC use the FPS to keep track of employees' pay, tax, national insurance contributions. It also helps to ensure more accurate calculations of various benefits to your employees, so it does help to reduce the risk of overpayments or underpayments there too. But now that we know a bit more about that, I do want to just take a look at how to submit this FPS from Payroll. So I'll turn my camera off and we'll dive into the programme. And as you can see by the dates here, I have actually already processed and updated my employees for July. So the last updated date there is 31st of July. But we can see the FPS has not been sent yet. So that's still showing as June's date. Now you can submit the FPS from multiple places. So first place I'd like to show you is just from the e-submissions tasks. So you've got the option there for a full payment submission. And this is also where you'd be able to come to check those e-submission settings that I briefly talked about earlier. So in these settings, this is where you'd be able to connect Payroll with your Government Gateway login. So you've got that information there for that login. You've also got some contact details there as well. But I would very much recommend, if you're new to payroll, just checking you've got these submission settings all set up there. So e-submissions tasks, that's one place that you can submit the FPS from, but most likely you'll probably do that from your payroll tasks instead. So we can actually see it's got its own step there as part of the payroll process. Now, when you're sending the FPS, it's still very important to check your process date. Very important as well to know that you can't undo an FPS once it's been sent across to HMRC, hence why I always mention just checking your process date beforehand. But in the bottom right, I can see that is currently set to 31st of July, so that is correct for me. And from here, it'll just be a case of selecting the employees that I want to send the submission for. Now, I'm just deselecting an employee who I've got on hold. I've also got a leaver as well who left in March, so I don't want them to be included. But everyone else I do. I've got a new starter at the bottom as well, hence why there's no FPS date for them there. And once they're highlighted, I'll just click Full Payment Submission. Now, if you do have employees on hold, you will likely see this window. The first period that an employee is on hold, we would recommend sending a flag to HMRC to inform them that they are. But after that, you'll not need to include them on the submission, basically until they're getting paid again, so until their status is changed back. So I'll click Submit, and from here, it's just going to be a case of working through this submission window. So I'll click Continue. This also gives you the opportunity to double check those government gateway details. So I'll check those there and then click Submit. And we'll then see a summary of the liabilities and information that HMRC is going to receive. And if I just scroll down, something I do want to point out, I do have a new starter there. So HMRC will see their start date. And again, we've got the liabilities against each employee, tax period, etc., and a total liability at the top as well. And if you do want to print this, you've got the option there in the bottom left. If I did have a lever, you can see there is also a lever column, so I'd be able to see that as well. But apart from that, once you're happy with that information, you'll just need to click Submit. You'll see this loading bar going across, so this means your data is being sent to HMRC. And once that's been sent there, we will see a confirmation message. There we go, so we can see that has been sent across. Now, if you want to view or print the submission log to keep record of it, I would absolutely recommend to do so. You can do that here. So you can view and print that submission log if you need to. You've just got that option there. And something else I'd like to point out in here is this correlation ID. So this is like a string of numbers and letters there. This is a unique identifier for this particular submission that we've just sent. So if you ever have any issues with a submission and you need to query anything with HMRC or they're querying something with you, bit of best practice from me, you can go to the e-submissions log in Payroll, get that correlation ID for the submission that's getting queried, and then HMRC and you will be able to find exactly which submission you're on about and kind of, compare anything that you need to there. But apart from that, that is the submission all done. So I'll click Close. And we can see now my last FPS date has updated to the 31st of July. So that is how to submit the FPS. Of course, it can be found on the process map as well. So if you would prefer that more visual way of kind of working through the steps of your pay run, you can go to View and Change View, and then you can switch on the process map that way. But again, it can also be found in your payroll tasks and your e-submission tasks as well. So a couple of different places, depending on whatever you'd prefer. You check your process date, make sure that is the correct date, and then work through that submission window to send the FPS details to HMRC. And that will include the current period's liabilities, any new starter or leaver flags, and some other details as well, including your pay date. But that is the most common submission that you'll need to send. Second most common, this is going to be the EPS, or the Employer Payment Summary. So this submission is sent to report values to HMRC that aren't included in the FPS. So this could be things like reclaiming statutory payments, CIS deductions, apprenticeship levy, or even just to inform HMRC that no payment is due in a particular tax month. So you would only need to send the the EPS if one of those apply to you. Another thing to mention is when it should be sent as well. So it should be sent by the 19th of the following tax month. So for example, July's EPS would need to be sent by the 19th of August to be able to kind of apply for the reduction, which I'll talk about shortly. And something that differs between the FPS and the EPS as well is how often that you would send it. So the EPS, this only needs to be sent once per tax month, and that's actually regardless of your payment frequency. So even if you do pay your staff more often than monthly, for example, weekly, fortnightly, the EPS it's like a month-end task. So once you've processed all of your payment periods in the tax month, that is when you'd be able to check and see if you need to send it. And then of course, if you do, get that submitted. Easiest way to think of it really, the FPS is going to tell HMRC how much you need to pay them, but the EPS is going to tell HMRC how much you're reducing that payment by. So it basically allows you to apply for a reduction in your liability. So that's why you've got that deadline there of the 19th of the following tax month if you are applying for a reduction for that particular month. Helpful tip as well, if you do forget to submit your EPS by the deadline for a tax month, you can just submit an EPS when you process the next period. So each EPS submission does include year-to-date values, and HMRC will receive the totals for the tax year so far. And another little tip as well, so if you do check your P32 report as a month-end task, which we would always recommend that you do, if you do have a value in the total national insurance contribution deductions line, that is a good indication that you need to send an EPS. So this total on that line, this could be made up from things like apprenticeship levy or statutory maternity or paternity pay, for example. But that is always a good way of just double checking whether you need to send one. So I'm actually going to go ahead and double check now. So back to payroll. And remember that EPS is a month-end task, so you would send that once all of your pay runs in the tax month are complete, which we can see now by those dates, mine are. And actually, I know that I need to send an EPS. I do actually have an employee on statutory maternity pay, which I'll be reclaiming. But for those of you who are unsure, again, I would recommend just checking your P32 report. You do have a quick link for this just in the payroll link section. Don't forget you can resize that panel if you can't see that. But we'll click P32 and we'll just double check that value. So I do run this every month, so I'm just going to run it for the current one, tax month 4. And let that load up, and I'll just make that a little bit bigger. And the figure that we're bothered about is actually line number 18, so total national insurance contributions deductions. I can see I do have a figure in there, and this means I do need to send an EPS. So that's one way that you can check it there. Now, when it comes to actually sending one, again, a couple of different places that you can do so, similar to the FPS. One option is actually just above the P32 report there. You've got employer payment summary. You've also got it in the e-submission section too. So we can see employer payment summary there. Now, slightly different to the FPS, you won't actually get that submission window straight away, just until you've completed this wizard. So as I mentioned, there are different scenarios where you need to send your EPS, and we basically just need to tell payroll which one we're sending it for. So you might need to adjust your payment to HMRC because you've got statutory payments, which I do. So I'm going to select that option. But also if you're informing HMRC that no payment is due for a particular month, whether that's the current month, future months, etc., you do have different options there. So just select the one that's appropriate for you. Mine is because I'm recovering statutory payments, and then I'll click Next. We can't change that tax month, that's just automatically come up as the tax month that we're in, so tax month 4. I'll click Next again, and now we can see we do have a summary of those year-to-date values for the statutory payments. So I can see I've got that maternity pay figure there, the NIC reclaimed as well. If I did have any other payments, I'd be able to see the year-to-dates there for them too. But I'll just click Next. You'll see that year-to-date figures for various other things as well, so if applicable, do double check the CIS deductions suffered. Again, year-to-date value. Next, and same thing with apprenticeship levy, that will be a year-to-date figure. I'll click Next and Finish. And once I've completed that wizard, this is when that submission window comes up. So it will look similar to an FPS, but I just want to go through that with you. So click Continue. Again, another opportunity to check those details. Click Submit. This time we don't get that summary underneath as we did with the FPS. And I'm just going to click Submit. But again, we do get that loading bar going across. So this is sending that data to HMRC, and we'll get a similar kind of confirmation afterwards as well. Great, so confirmation that's been successful. Again, if you do want that submission log or you want to get that correlation ID, this is one place that you can make a note of that. I'll click Close. Now, different as well from the FPS, there isn't an obvious date stamp or a column showing when the EPS was last sent. That's only for the last FPS date. But I will be coming back to this a little bit later, and I'll show you where you can check in the e-submissions log. So just a reminder then for the EPS. So I just did that from my e-submissions tasks. Work through that EPS wizard to select the reason for that EPS, and of course check those year-to-date values, and then use that submission window to submit that across to HMRC. So that is the FPS and EPS. They're the main submissions really that you'll need to know about. But in this section, I do also want to talk about a couple of other submissions. First one, this is going to be to do with adjustments. So we know that payroll doesn't go smoothly 100% of the time. There will be times where corrections are needed. So you might need to go back and restore a backup or roll back a couple of employees to correct something in a pay run that's already been completed. That's totally normal. But in that situation, what happens to the FPS? Because as I did say before, you can only send one FPS per tax period. And if there have been any changes, of course, HMRC do need to be notified of any corrections and any adjustments to the liability as well. So in this situation, you'd need to send something called an FPS adjustment. And this includes those corrected values for your payroll and the adjustments to the liability as well. So it means that HMRC will have the latest information for you and for your employees. You would send this submission once you've made all of your corrections and once your payroll is totally back up to date again. So as an example, let's say I needed to make corrections to the last few months of payroll. I would reprocess those periods, make those corrections and update the records for each of them. But as I'm working through those periods, I would just skip the FPS, so that has already been sent. But then once I'm back up to date again, and I've updated the most recent period, instead of the FPS at that point, what I would do is send the FPS adjustment. And that's going to include all of the adjustments to every period that I've corrected kind of in that tax year. So although the submission does only show values for the most recent period that you've corrected, any prior periods that you've amended are included in the submission year to date. So if you have changed a couple of weeks, a couple of months, HMRC will be informed of the adjustments to each of those periods in that one submission. So just to recap that, you've sent your normal FPS, but then you've made changes to payroll, which means those figures that you did send are no longer correct. Once all of your corrections have been made, that's when you'll need to send that adjustment. And this is done from your payroll tasks, process map or e-submissions tasks. The submission will look very similar to the normal FPS, but as I said, instead of showing the liability as the FPS does, it will instead show the liability adjustment. And again, linking to corrections, as for the EPS, if your corrections have affected those year-to-date values for things like statutory payments or apprenticeship levy, you would need to submit a new EPS, just in the same way that we did before, with those updated year-to-date values for the tax year. So that will just be the same submission. And as long as you've not missed the deadline for the tax month, yeah, you can just send that again. But as I said before, if you have missed that deadline or you forgot to send it, you will be able to send it for the next period, and it will include year-to-date values for the tax year. So those three submissions that I've just talked about, they're all for the current tax year. But if you've had to go back and amend a previous tax year's figures, again, HMRC must be notified of this. So with RTI, you do have the option to submit an FPS adjustment for a previous tax year. And in Stage 50 payroll, this submission is called Amend a Previous Tax Year. Now, this is going to give HMRC the updated year-to-dates for the previous tax year and just help to ensure that your employees' records and calculations are correct too. Now, something to bear in mind when you are submitting this amendment is that you can't do it if there is processing in the current tax year. So if you've made changes to last tax year, so 24-25 for example, and you need to submit these changes to HMRC, you must do that before you kind of continue to reprocess and correct this tax year. If you do process beyond the new tax year, you will need to roll back any kind of changes in this tax year, or the submission will come back with an error message and you won't actually be able to send that. But as I say, we have linked information to each of the submissions that I've been talking about, and we do have a step-by-step guide on this slide here, and that will talk you through exactly how to send one, including those tips that I've mentioned too. Couple of different scenarios as well where you won't be able to use this submission. So if you are submitting corrections for even earlier tax years, so let's say like 4 or 5 years ago, again, just check out the guides on this slide for more information, because you won't be able to send it through payroll, but you might be able to use HMRC's tools to submit the changes instead, and then of course still inform them of any changes there. So that is amending a previous tax year. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about in this section, so this is relating to employment allowance. This is an EPS submission that I'll be talking about, but it's not the same EPS that we've just spoke about. In relation to employment allowance, this submission basically allows you to apply for it, and it means that eligible employers can reduce their annual national insurance liability by up to £10,500. So employers will pay less employers' Class 1 national insurance each time that you run payroll until that £10,500 is gone, or until the tax year ends, so it's whichever is sooner for that. Important just to bring up here as well, these rules did change as of this tax year. So in April, the amount of employment allowance that you could get increased from £5,000 to £10,500, so it's more than doubled, as well as getting rid of the eligibility rule relating to employers' national insurance. So from this tax year, 25-26, it basically means that more employers are eligible for this. And again, I've linked more information on this slide. Now, ideally, employment allowance is applied for at the beginning of the tax year. That's always what we would recommend. We always advise it's done as part of your kind of getting ready for the new tax year tasks. But you can technically apply for it and claim it at any time in the tax year. Obviously, the earlier that you apply for it and claim it though, the sooner that you will get that allowance. Very quick and easy to apply for it as well. You can do this either through payroll in the company settings, which I'll show you in just a moment, or you can do it through HMRC's basic PYE tools. So there are a couple of options for you. Now, if you are doing it through payroll, I just want to show you whereabouts this would be. So we'll go to the company tasks, and we're just going to go and open up those settings. And on here, it's just the first page that you're after. So little section in the bottom left for eligible for employment allowance. You can see I've got some settings here, and I've also got a tick box, which I've already ticked. So as you can see, I have already applied for this. I did this at the beginning of the tax year, but you would be able to click this box, which would instead be called Apply for EA, and it would come up with this same window for you. So in here, you will just be able to select whether or not you're applicable for state aid, which in most cases will be not applicable. And then you'll be able to click submit, and that would kind of walk you through that application submission. It will look almost identical to your EPS. So just a case of working through that, checking those gateway details, click and submit, and watching that loading bar going across. And then HMRC will receive an EPS with the employment allowance application. Now, if your application is unsuccessful, you will receive a notification from HMRC within 5 working days. But if you don't hear back from HMRC at all, this means that your application has been successful. You can then tick that box in the settings here, and this will mean that Payroll will begin to calculate that employment allowance in each pay period. So see, I've already applied for that at the beginning of the tax year. And since I did already apply for it, something else I just want to show you in the settings here is the HMRC Payments tab. So in here, we do have a table on the right-hand side here, and this column actually shows the employment allowance that I've used each period. So from the beginning of the tax year, I can double check how much I've kind of used each period, and I can see where that £10,500 is getting used. And then of course, once I've used it up, it will stop the employment allowance. So not a lot of people know about this table. It's always just handy to show that there, but you can see the employment allowance. So again, that's just in the company settings. But of course, if you do want to do that through HMRC's tools instead, you do have that option as well. Now, a couple of other features of Payroll that I would like to show you, which are really handy when we're talking about submissions that you send to HMRC. And both of these are found in your e-submissions tasks. So first one, this is the e-submissions log. And this is basically going to allow you to review submissions and check any notices that you've applied to your employees, and it shows summaries of those submissions. You can filter the log by the submission type, by the date, the status as well, so if it's been successful or not. And it will look a little bit something like what you can see on this screen here. Now, it does also show a history of applied mail that you might have applied to HMRC in the HMRC mailbox. So this could be things that you've received, such as tax code notices or student loan notices. And in relation to the mailbox, we do actually have a whole webinar going through the HMRC mailbox. If you're interested in that, we do have a couple of sessions coming up in August. So I'll show you how to get that all set up and how to use it and apply those notices. But taking a closer look at this e-submissions log then, just want to go through the kind of different features. So first of all, you are able to use these drop-down filters to filter the view there. Really handy if you're looking for a particular type of submission. You can find the correlation ID for a submission. So this is that unique identifier that I mentioned. Really, really great if HMRC contact you about a submission that you've made, or other way around, if you need to contact them about a submission. It just means you both know exactly which submission that you're talking about, and it just allows you to kind of compare any figures that you need, knowing that you're both talking about the same thing. So really handy there. You can also delete entries from the log, but please note this doesn't delete or undo submissions that have gone to HMRC. Remember, you can't undo a submission. But what it does do is just delete it from the submissions log itself. You can also print submission or notice details if you would like to keep record of this. So obviously, as I showed you, submitting the FPS and EPS and things, if you forgot to print the log at that point, you can come back to the e-submissions log and print a particular one that you might have forgot. And you can also view further details of the submissions or applied notices to see what information has gone across, which employees were included, which is really, really great for troubleshooting too. So they're the kind of main features there of the e-submissions log. But linking to that troubleshooting, and particularly with an FPS submission, let's say you do need a bit more information about what was included. The FPS viewer, this is a different feature there of Payroll, this can provide that for you. So the FPS viewer, this lets you see what's been included in a particular FPS that you've already submitted. And you do also have the flexibility to add or remove columns from the list to kind of tailor the information that's relevant to you, depending on what information that you need. So I just want to pop back to Payroll briefly, just to show you one more thing relating to this FPS viewer. So bring that up. We're going to go to the e-submissions tasks again. And this time we'll just click FPS viewer. Great, so it just comes up with this window here. So on the left, you do have all of the different FPS submissions with the exact date and time that they were sent. And if you select a particular one, on the right there, you've got the kind of main information and main view of that FPS information. So I've just selected a random one there, but by default we can see we've got the employee's forename, surname, national insurance number. We've got the pay date for that particular pay period as well. So this was actually March's submission. If we go across as well, we've got more information on tax and national insurance and lots more columns, as you can see as well. So you've got a lot of choices in here in terms of information that you need, but let's say that you had something from HMRC and you needed to check the tax codes that HMRC had received from an employee. I just want to point out this columns option in the top right. So if I click on this, this gives you information, like extra information that you can add into this viewer. So if they were wanting to know more information about a tax code and I wanted to just double check what had been sent, I can select a tax code from this list and click close. And if I scroll across now, I can see I do have a new column here for tax code. So I would be able to compare the different submissions and just double check what tax code had been sent for that particular employee. And if there was a mistake or something that needed changing, I'd be able to tell exactly what that was. But lots of information in here, lots of different things that you can include, including dates for particular statutory payments and various student loan information, postgraduate loan information, and director status as well. So any of those things that you need, you can add on to the FPS viewer. And then, as always, you do have this kind of summary at the bottom too, and a little bit of a breakdown of that liability there, which of course updates with the relevant figures depending on which submission that you've selected, as well as the options to print or export these figures if you need to. So just a little bit there on the FPS viewer. So really handy feature when it comes to needing to reconcile figures or troubleshooting a little bit. So if you do need to dig a bit deeper into what's been sent, I would absolutely recommend having a look at that FPS viewer. But that does bring us on to the last section of the webinar, just a small section for this one. And I just want to talk about the personal tax account. So not everybody knows about this, but I do think it's a really handy resource for individuals. So it's just to really make you aware of it, to be honest. So the personal tax account, this is an online service that allows people to check the records and manage their details with HMRC. And I just want to go over some of its kind of key features. So first thing, this is income tax management. So an individual can check their income tax estimate, tax code. They can view their income from work over the last 5 years, for example, check how much income tax have been paid in the previous 5 years. So it's really handy. Tax returns and refunds. So an individual can fill in, send and view personal tax returns and also claim any tax refunds if they are due any. We've got personal details and benefits, so they can update their own personal details like their name and address, as well as check and manage any benefits such as child benefit and tax credits as well. They can also check national insurance and state pension. Various employment and benefits from work as well. So if they do receive like company car, things like that, or medical insurance, they can double check those details. And then also something called the unique taxpayer reference, or their UTR number. They can find this on here, and this is essential for self-assessment. So that is one place that they can find it. So if you aren't sure what this is, definitely take a look at the links on this slide. You can access it on your phone as well, so it doesn't just have to be on a computer. But as I say, you can find loads of helpful information and figures on this account, so it would be really, really good just to make your employees aware of. And then last thing that I do want to talk about, this is actually a bit of a diagram of the RTI process. So I've spoken about loads of different submissions throughout this, and I just want to kind of show you a bit of a kind of visual, just to show you how it all links up really. So we'll start with the employer. So this is going to be most of you watching the webinar today, I think. So the company, the payroll, the employer. The payroll will be processed, of course, and during this process, the pay slips are produced for the employees, followed by the payments and deductions going to the employee, so they get paid. And that's of course made up of a variety of payments and deductions. If we just go back up to the employer now as well, They'll then send that RTI, so the FPS or the EPS, which goes through your government gateway account. You'll get a success message with confirmation of the submission, which then sends that payroll information across to HMRC. The information that HMRC gets can then be fed down the other way to that personal tax account that I just mentioned. So that's what the employee can kind of use to check the records and manage the details and things like that. And yeah, they can kind of log in there to view that. So just to kind of show you how it all kind of works with each other, I do find it really interesting seeing it all like this and what these processes all link to. So be sure to download the handout if you do want to keep that, or any of the other slides, of course, that we've gone through today as well. But with that being said, that does bring us to the end of the webinar content for your guide to HMRC submissions. I do hope you found out some useful information today. But before I say goodbye, still just a couple of minutes left to make you aware of the further support that we've got available, starting with the upcoming webinars. So we do run webinars throughout the whole year on various different things to do with Sage 50 payroll. So we do have sessions coming up on the online payslips and P60s. We do have the kind of part 2 to get your payroll done, which is all about those month-end tasks. And Duncan will be talking about EPSs and things in that too, if you do want to come along. As I mentioned as well, we do have a couple of sessions in August for the HMRC secure mailbox. So if you want to see how that's set up and how you can receive notices and kind of apply those to your employees, definitely come along to that session. And we've also got the payroll assistant, and yeah, lots more coming up in August too. And then we've got the HR advice webinar. So our next one is on the 6th of August at 11 o'clock. And this one is real scenarios, real advice. So we do have some experts coming from Advisor Plus who are going to talk you through some real world HR situations that small businesses face. And they just help to provide you with actionable solutions, overcome some common challenges as well that you might be facing. And as always, they do include some really, really great advice with those. So I would absolutely recommend getting yourself signed up for that too. We do also have the Sage Help Centre, so that's sage.co.uk/help. Here you'll be able to search the knowledge base. You can access different support guides and demonstration videos. We do also have a webinar section, so you can view all of the previous recordings of the sessions that we've done, if you do want to kind of rewatch any of those. And then we do have contact options as well, so if you do need to get into contact with technical support for any reason, we do have the options on there as well. And that is just sage.co.uk/help. And then last but not least, it's Sage University, so sageu.com. You'll be able to set up a free account on here and access different e-learning and bite-sized learning courses, as well as earning product certification too. So for Sage 50 Payroll or Sage 50 Accounts, Sage HR, loads of different products. Really, really a great way just to expand your knowledge on those. And yeah, as I say, earn certification for them too. So that's just sageu.com. But that has brought us to the end of the webinar. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. As I said at the beginning, I will be leaving the webinar open for another 5 minutes or so, just to allow you to look through the questions and download any of that Q&A if you would like to keep them. If you are leaving us now, do remember you can download the handouts. And last ask from me as well, you will see a short survey as you kind of exit the webinar. If you do have just a moment to fill that out, or you've got any comments or anything to leave us, we would really, really appreciate that. We do read all of the comments that you leave us and just constantly try to update and improve these sessions going forward. But keep an eye on your emails for a recording of the webinar coming through. And yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We would love to see you on another webinar very soon. As I say, I will keep the webinar open just to check we've answered all the questions, and be sure to download any that you want to keep. But other than that, from me and Duncan, we will see you next time. It's goodbye for now.